Have you been thinking of moving to Central Alberta and you're thinking about an acreage? The timing couldn't be better. Central Alberta acreages are heating up, and believe it or not, this is a spring day in Central Alberta. So stick around to the end of this video, you won't want to miss it. I will make sure it's worth your time. So if this is your first time to our video, please like and subscribe so you get notifications every time we have a new video coming out. If you don't know who I am, my name's Jason Walls. My wife and I, along with the Walls Real Estate Group, get calls, texts, and emails every single day from people just like you looking to make the move to Central Alberta. Today's topic obviously is acreages. So whether you're thinking of moving to an acreage in 9 days, 90 days, or a year from now, Shalane and I will be here. So we do the research so you don't have to. Let's go inside and let's get talking more about acreages. All right, now we're out of that snow, which is typical for April in Alberta. So if you are moving to Central Alberta, you have to understand that we will always get snowstorms in Alberta. However, as I mentioned, the acreage market is heating up. So now is the time to get looking, and I just want to explain a few things as to why it's the perfect time to get looking for acreages. So let's get started. Why is spring the best time to look at acreages in Central Alberta? Well, there's many reasons. So let's get started as to why that is. In the springtime, everybody's got cabin fever. Everybody's been cooped up all winter. So we want to get looking at acreages. There's several reasons why it's best. One, we can see the land. So in Central Alberta, everybody knows that in the wintertime, obviously, it's covered in snow. So we still move a lot of acreages in the wintertime, but there's always that element of surprise that when the buyers buy it and they don't know exactly what is hidden underneath the snow, there could be some unwanted surprises. So there is always that gamble, and that's okay. A lot of people are fine with that. But in the springtime, the snow is gone. You can see everything. You can tell where the septic tank is. You can tell where the water well casing is. You can see the layout of the land. You can see what the grass is like. You can check all that stuff out. So that's why it is really nice in the springtime to start looking at that. Also, the roads are more accessible. So some of the acreages we look at are fairly remote, and so it's hard sometimes to get into them. You know, whether it's a bare land acreage that the road isn't plowed, things like that. So in the springtime, it's a lot easier to get access to it and understand exactly where you're at, especially if it's a larger acreage or it's a land. You gotta get the quad or the ATV and you wanna zoom around and make sure everything's good. It's much easier in the springtime. You can also tell what the landscaping's like. So many places you can't really understand what the landscape is like. The grass condition, you know, the weeds, all the different things that are around that are covered, whether you know around the barns or the corrals, that kind of thing. If you go looking for a larger land piece, it's so much easier when you can see everything and the snow is gone. And a last thing about that is listings. There's always going to be more listings, more choices. So good or bad, springtime has more listings, so there's more competition, but you have a greater variety of choices to choose from. So we're going to go into a little bit of an explanation as to what is about the listings and how they go. But obviously in springtime, we always get more listings, and this year's no exception. Acreages have been very tight over the last year and a half. And anything within an hour of Central Alberta, like specifically around Red Deer, we see a lot of acreages not lasting very long. The prices are going up, and we'll talk about that as well. So obviously in the springtime, acreages show better. And you don't want to have a lot of surprises when you're buying an acreage. So when you can walk the land, you can make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. You can check the low spots. It's really nice if there is any flooding areas that are lower. It really does give you that opportunity to see where the water is going to lie, how much there is, if there's going to be any water damage to property. Sometimes if it doesn't have proper weeping tile, things like that around the house, we'll have that lot more of a better idea in the springtime when the snow's melting and the rains are coming. Unless you're looking today when the snow is coming, then it is a lot easier to do that then as well. Buyers are a lot more active. So if we're on the listing side of things, there's a lot more activity, a lot more buyers coming out of the woodwork, a lot more buyers have had spring fever. They've been stuck in their homes. Maybe they've been living in town. They've always dreamt of having that beautiful acreage. So in the springtime, when listings go up, there's a lot more opportunity. You can see a lot more things. There's more choices. So it's really nice. Right now, anytime within an hour of Red Deer, they are selling quite quickly, and there's not a lot of them. So now with interest rates coming down 7 times in the last few months, the rates are much more attractive. So it's much more affordable. We'll talk a little bit about pricing on the acreages, things like that. But the springtime, you see the flowers, you see they're starting to bloom, you see the grass starting to come up, the flowers come out, the leaves coming out. That's a huge thing. Green grass and leaves. I cannot wait. It's been a long winter. So that just helps make the acreages look that much more attractive. So if you're buying, you can see more what you're going to have. If you're selling, it's much nicer. It's much more attractive for your listings to be shown. When we do our drone footage of the listings, we can highlight everything around the surrounding community, around your neighbors, everything that we can do around to show. We try and advertise and highlight all the good things. And obviously the peak exposure that we can do. Shalane and I at the Walls Real Estate Group, we do a lot of advertising, even in different provinces. So when you're thinking about moving to Central Alberta and you're either from a different province or a different region of Alberta, we really try to target the audience. We try to do the perfect job of marketing to make sure that if you're selling, that we do the best job we can and get you the full exposure. And if you're buying, it's much easier when you can find things that we have listed in other areas to come to Central Alberta. So that's really a highlight that Shalane and I like to do. And we will explain all that stuff if you're selling in our listing presentation and our listing appointment, trying to find out exactly what you're looking for and how we can help you best. So I know if you've watched any of our videos, please do so if I'm moving to Central Alberta, as you're seeing on this channel. So if this is your first time to our channel, welcome. Shalane and I, we do get calls and text emails all the time from clients always looking to move to Central Alberta, and we're so happy to help them. It is such a major move to uproot your family, to come from a different community to Central Alberta, but it is beautiful and it is worth it. And we'd love to have people come into our communities. So some of the things that people look for that make acreages different than just normal residential places is you've got your own well. So you really have to understand the gallons per minute that you're gonna have with your well, how old the well is, how deep the well is, how old your pump is. That kind of stuff really does make a difference. You also have to understand the zoning. So if you wanna run a business from your acreage, then you have to understand the difference between country residential zoning, agriculture zoning. Those things are really important. Sometimes there's light industrial zoning. So you really want to understand what the land is zoned at. It can be rezoned at sometimes, but not always. And so you always have to get county approval. So be careful when you're doing that. Another item that you really want to address that you don't necessarily think about is a septic. So is your septic tank in good condition? Is your field in good condition? Do you have an older grandfathered system where it's maybe an open discharge? Do you have a mound instead of a field? Is your field maybe saturated? There's a lot of things to consider with the septic system, and it's very expensive to replace. But if it does need to be replaced, then that can all be negotiated within the price. And so you really want to make sure that that is looked at. You also want to look at accessibility. Are you on a dead end road? Are you have a long driveway? Will you have to buy a tractor with a blade or a quad with a blade or ATV side by side? Things like that are all extra expenses that you have to understand. Also, if you're trying to run a business, will you have internet? Starlink is there for a lot of people, and that seems to be a really good solution. But those are all items that you don't think about when you're living in town. But if you want the beautiful privacy and the wide open spaces, then it's worth it. But you do have to look at it, and your house will have to take it into consideration and add those extra expenses in. If you're looking to maybe have some animals, you have to have a certain amount of acres in order to get approval to have some animals. So is the acreage already having corrals? Does it have barns? What are the conditions of the buildings? How much is it going to cost to build? Or how much will it cost to repair some of these things? And so everybody knows that the building costs have gone up so much in the last 7 or 8 years. Even in the last 8-9 years, we went to a real estate meeting just not that long ago, and they said costs on building construction materials have gone up 90% in the last 7 years. And I know that's crazy, but when you're looking at building the corrals or the barns or the lean-tos or the garages, those are all things that you have to take into consideration if you're building. And sometimes if the land is zoned ag, then you have to put a larger down payment on. Those are things that we can put you in touch with a qualified mortgage broker, and we have many of those that are excellent and they can help you out. You also have to consider location. So if you've got children that are going to be going to school, you have to look at school buses. Can the school buses, do they drive by your acreage? Can they gain accessibility in the wintertime to your laneway? So many things that, you don't necessarily think about that you have to consider. And we will discuss all those things with you because we've probably walked hundreds of acreages in the last 8-9 years that it's really important to understand. And if you've had an acreage, you already know all this stuff, but so many people, their dream is to have the privacy and the freedom and the space, and they've never had an acreage, and you just don't know what you know. And so it's really important to have qualified professionals. So Shalane and I, we've done so many acreages. We have so many trusted professionals. So the inspections and things like that are really important. And we have a whole list of qualified trades, whether it's the septic or the water well testing, the home inspection. We know people to talk to in the different counties regarding zoning and what they can do if they do need to change it or what's allowed, things like that. It's really important to know who it is that you're dealing with, and so we'll help you with that. So I know I discussed inventory. So some people always say, what is the average price for acreages in Central Alberta? And that ranges so much depending on number of acres. Location is always key. The type of home, the type of shop, the type of building. So I would say, I always tell clients, if you're getting between 3 and 5 acres and you want to be within half an hour of Red Deer, which so many of our clients want to be, you're looking at between the $800,000 to $1 million mark. You can always get ones a little bit less than that, and you can get ones that are much more expensive than that. But I would have to say that that's probably the average. And so that's kind of where I tell people that, if you want to have an acreage and you want to be able to find one within the location you want, that's usually the range we're at. We've got some that are down even at the $500,000 mark, but we've got some that are $2, $3, $4 million. It just really depends. If you go farther out, we find that east of Red Deer, the acreage prices seem to get a little bit lower. You go west of Red Deer and people like the outdoors, the mountains, the trails, that kind of stuff, then the prices seem to increase. But if you go farther than half an hour, then you're going to get more for your dollar. But if it's a convenience, you want to be close to Red Deer or Sylvan or Olds or like that, Rocky Mountain House even, then you're going to be paying a little bit higher because that seems to be the highest demand that we see with the acreages in our area. The average days on market, if you are looking, it is about 40 days, 40 to 65 days I find. So in Central Alberta, the residential homes, it's probably around the 4 to 7 days on average. So homes are moving very quickly. Acreages, they sometimes go very quick, but lots of times they'll sit, especially because of wear time. So the average days on market don't mean as much for acreages as it does for houses because, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, acreages don't move as quickly in the wintertime because there's too many variables, and so people choose to buy more acreages in the summertime. But that's kind of the average days on market because people always ask me how long it's going to take to sell my acreage. And if we've had acreages that have taken over a year, and we've had acreages that we sold within a few days. So it really does depend. But the nice thing with spring and acreages is there's more and more popping up. So this time of year, less the snowstorm today that we're getting, there will be more popping up. April, May, June is always the peak months for new listings for residential as well as acreages. There's no exception. So I just kind of wanted to highlight some of the negatives that you want to be careful of when you're buying acreage and some of the mistakes that people make that when they're not using a qualified realtor, they're not making them on purpose, but they've made them and it really can be very costly. Sometimes it ends up working out, but sometimes it ends up being a serious problem. So some of the things that can be looked at that are overseen is the zoning. So I'd already discussed some of the zoning issues that come with acreages, whether it's ag, country residential, light industrial. So really make sure that what you're planning to do with acreages, the zoning fits. So if you want to have a business, you have to have ag typically. If you're just wanting to have a residence, then country residential is great. And so you really just want to make sure that you have the zoning zoned in and make sure that you don't get surprised at the end of it. You really want to make sure you're testing the water and the septic system. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it can be really expensive if you have to drill a new well or put a new septic tank and field in. It can be thousands and thousands of dollars, $50,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 if you have to replace both systems, depending on the soil conditions, the depth of the well. There's a lot of variables, but the water and the septic is a huge part of acreage. So please, whether you use the Walls Real Estate Group, which we hope you do,
Always make sure you get the water and the septic system tested. It's well worth the investment of the inspections when you've got an accepted offer before you remove all conditions. You always want to understand the land boundaries. So a lot of acreages are within a few acres, and so it's really easy to see where your land boundary is. But there is, when you buy a full quarter or you're buying 30 or 40 or 60 acres, you really want to make sure that that land is surveyed. You know exactly where your land boundaries are, so there's no surprises with your neighbors, and there's no surprises at the end of it when you think, oh, well, maybe I thought I had more land, or oh, I didn't realize that tree line was not my boundary. It's actually closer or farther away. So really make sure that you get a survey. Your realtor explains exactly where your land boundaries are, and you know exactly what you're buying. And if you are selling and you've got outbuildings, you've got a barn, you've got a shed, you've got machine shops or shed places or cattle lean-tos, really make sure that you highlight all that stuff, because it really does make a difference to the buyers. And obviously if you're selling, you want to get full value, so really make sure that your realtor does you a favor and highlights the property properly and make sure that everything is highlighted. So some of the challenges that acreages have. So everybody wants the space, everybody wants the privacy, everybody really loves the idea of acreage living, but there are additional challenges that you don't always think about. And so you really want to make sure that you understand, and that's my job or Shalane's job to explain that to you when we start our process, especially if you're coming from the city and you've never lived on an acreage before. And here's a couple things that we just want you to look out for. One, you may need specialized equipment. You may need a ride-on lawnmower. You may need something to help with the snow in the wintertime. You may need, services, whether or not everything's hooked up, your internet. Sometimes there's just conveniences that you're not going to have on an acreage that you're going to have in town. I mentioned the school bus. Does the school bus come? How long is a bus ride for the kids every day? Is it going to be an hour ride each way for the poor kids? I know I grew up on a farm and it was 45 minutes each way. And that was a big part of the day, especially when you're younger and the kids come home tired every day. So things like that you want to take into consideration. The trash and recycling. So there is no pickup every week at your door like there is in town. So you have to look at getting a bin, or you have to arrange to have services come out and pick them up, or you have to take them in somewhere. So there are county places to take your dump and your recycling and stuff like that, but those are things you have to look at as well. Emergency services. So if something happens, if there's a fire or a family member has something happening that they need to get an ambulance, you have to take that into consideration as well. If you're close to town or close to a city, then it's not such a big deal. But if you're a long ways away, you have to take that into account, and not everybody does that. Hopefully those are things you never have to consider or have happen, but you do want to take a look at them when you're looking at location. But here's the trade-off, guys. Privacy. You get the space, you get the quietness, you get the stars at night, you get all that stuff. And so there's so many advantages that, overturn some of the challenges and some of the things you have to look at. So those are all things we just want you not to be surprised about at the end. When you get out there and you're getting all settled in, you go, oh, I never thought about that, or I never thought about that. We want to make sure there's very few surprises for you when you move into that beautiful new acreage. Other things to consider with now economics, there's so much uncertainty, with tariffs and government elections and all that kind of stuff. The nice thing with acreages is they always seem to be in demand. They always seem to increase in value. So in Central Alberta, we're in a nice little bubble. Our real estate prices don't always increase a lot, but the nice thing with acreages is they always seem to be holding their value better than anything else. Everybody's always looking to expand to an acreage. They all want that space and privacy. So there is a lot of advantages as far as that goes. We are as affordable as any place. Anything with real estate in Central Alberta is always affordable, considering people that are moving from Ontario or BC. They can't believe our prices. Same with acreages. There's still more money than residential houses in a lot of situations, but if you're moving from out of province, it's super affordable, and the scenery and everything is so much better. So if you're thinking about it, it is a really good long-term investment. Shalane and I have done a lot of acreages. We'd be happy to explain all the ins and outs of acreage living, the pros and the cons, the good and the bad. We are as transparent as anybody is. We want to make sure you're happy with everything. So let us know how we can help. Let us know if this video has been of any help to you. We do the research so you don't have to. You're dealing with somebody that has done a lot of them. I grew up on a farm. Shalane and I specialize in acreages. We'd love to have people move out of town and into them. It's so nice to see when the kids are running around in the grass and the parents are happy and everything's been done properly. So give us a call, let us know how we can help, and we'd like to help you. Thanks.